November 20th, 1943. Imperial Japanese Army Headquarters, Tarawa Atoll. Colonel Keiji Shibasaki, commanding the garrison of 4,500 troops defending Betio Island, reviewed intelligence reports from observers who had witnessed the American assault on Makin Atoll 3 months earlier. Among the captured American equipment were photographs and descriptions of a new weapon the Americans called the Bazooka. The weapon appeared absurd by Japanese military standards. A metal tube, approximately 5 feet long, open at both ends, fired from the shoulder like a rifle, but launching rocket-propelled projectiles rather than bullets. The intelligence assessment described it as an anti-tank weapon, though the projectile weighed only 3.5 pounds with a warhead diameter of 2.36 inches. Lieutenant Colonel Takeo Sugai, Shibasaki's artillery officer, examined the intelligence photographs with professional disdain. The Americans have created a shoulder-fired rocket launcher. The warhead is too small to penetrate our fortifications. The range is minimal, perhaps 300 meters maximum. The accuracy is questionable. This weapon poses no significant threat to our defensive positions. Shibasaki studied the bunker system he had spent months constructing on Betio. Reinforced concrete walls 3 feet thick, log and sand roofs capable of withstanding 500-pound bombs, interlocking fields of fire covering every beach approach. Steel-reinforced pillboxes housing 75mm guns. His defensive network was the most sophisticated in the Pacific, designed to withstand naval bombardment, aerial attack, and infantry assault. The Americans rely on technological gimmicks because they lack warrior spirit, Shibasaki observed. They create weapons for soldiers who are afraid to close with the enemy. This bazooka is another example. A tube that shoots small rockets. Against our fortifications it will be useless. The assessment reflected Japanese military doctrine that had proven successful across the Pacific. Japanese defensive positions emphasized permanent fortifications, interlocking fields of fire, and defense in depth. American forces attempting to assault these positions suffered catastrophic casualties. At Tarawa, Shibasaki was confident his fortifications would inflict 10,000 casualties before American forces could establish a beachhead. What Colonel Shibasaki and his staff could not comprehend was that the bazooka represented a revolution in infantry firepower that would systematically dismantle the defensive doctrine Japanese forces had perfected. The weapon they dismissed as a technological gimmick was about to transform how infantry attacked fortified positions. The M1 bazooka had been developed in remarkable haste by American weapons designers facing a critical gap in infantry anti-tank capability. In 1942, as German armor devastated Allied forces in North Africa, the U.S. Army possessed no effective man-portable anti-tank weapon. Existing anti-tank rifles were ineffective against modern armor. Towed anti-tank guns were too heavy for infantry operations. American soldiers needed something lightweight, portable, and capable of destroying enemy armor. Captain Leslie Skinner and Lieutenant Edward Ewell created the solution in a single afternoon in May 1942. Ewell realized that shaped charge technology, which focused explosive force into a penetrating jet, could be miniaturized into a rocket projectile. Skinner recognized that the launch tube could be a simple steel pipe with basic sights and electrical firing mechanism. The result was a weapon weighing just 13 pounds that could be operated by 2 soldiers and could penetrate armor that conventional rifles couldn't touch. The weapon received its nickname, Bazooka, from its resemblance to a musical instrument played by comedian Bob Burns. The name stuck, becoming one of the most recognizable American weapons designations of the war. By Japanese military standards, the bazooka was fundamentally flawed. It was inaccurate beyond 100 meters. It was vulnerable to wind. The backblast revealed the operator's position. The shaped charge warhead, while effective against armor, seemed inadequate against reinforced concrete fortifications. Japanese artillery officers examining captured bazookas in late 1943 concluded the weapon was dangerous to tanks but irrelevant to fortified defensive warfare. This assessment would prove catastrophically wrong. The Battle of Tarawa began on November 20th, 1943. American Marines, assaulting Betio Island, faced exactly the defensive nightmare Colonel Shibasaki had prepared: reinforced bunkers, interlocking machine gun positions, artillery positions protected by concrete and logs. The initial assault, waves suffered horrific casualties. Over 1,500 Marines killed or wounded in the first day. But among the Marines landing on Betio were Bazooka teams, two-man crews, carrying the tube launchers and 2.36-inch rockets. These teams had been trained specifically for bunker assault operations, a role the weapons designers had not originally anticipated, but which field commanders had recognized as critical. Private First Class James Russell, a bazooka operator with the 2nd Marine Division, recorded his first encounter with Japanese fortifications in a letter. Written 3 weeks after the battle, we came up against a concrete pillbox with a 75mm gun that was tearing up our advance. Machine gun fire from supporting positions made it impossible to flank. Standard procedure would have been to call for naval gunfire or air support. Instead, we moved to within 50 yards using shell craters for cover. I fired 3 rockets at the embrasure. The first 2 penetrated the opening. The third hit the concrete beside it. The opposition went silent. What Russell had discovered, what Japanese defensive doctrine had not anticipated, was that the bazooka's shaped charge warhead was devastatingly effective against fortified positions in ways that larger, conventional weapons were not. The warhead didn't need to destroy the entire bunker. It only needed to penetrate the firing aperture or create spalling inside, the position that killed or incapacitated the defenders. The 3.5-pound warhead, traveling at 265 feet per second, would strike a bunker, opening and detonate, sending a jet of superheated metal and explosive force into the confined interior space. The effect inside a pillbox or bunker was catastrophic. Defenders were killed by blast overpressure, fragmentation, or the psychological trauma of having their protected position violated by a man-portable weapon. By the 2nd day of Tarawa, Marine officers were coordinating systematic bunker assaults using bazooka teams supported by rifle squads. The tactic was simple but revolutionary. Machine gun teams would suppress adjacent positions. Rifle squads would provide covering fire. The bazooka team would advance to within 30 to 50 yards, close enough for accurate fire, and engage. The bunker's firing ports, Japanese defenders, who had been trained that their concrete fortifications were impervious to anything except sustained bombardment from naval guns or aerial bombs, discovered that American infantry could destroy their positions with shoulder-fired weapons. The psychological impact was devastating. Corporal Tadashi Onuki, one of the few Japanese survivors from Tarawa, described the experience in post-war interviews. We were told our bunkers could withstand American firepower. The concrete was 3 feet thick. We had steel reinforcement. Naval shells had bounced off our positions. Then the Americans came with their tube weapons, small rockets that struck our firing ports. The first explosion killed 3 men inside our position. The second set off our ammunition. We couldn't understand how infantry weapons could penetrate our fortifications. It violated everything we had been taught about defensive warfare. The bazooka's effectiveness against Japanese bunkers came from a combination of factors that defensive designers had not anticipated. The shaped charge warhead focused explosive energy into a narrow jet capable of penetrating armor plate or concrete. The relatively small size allowed the rocket to pass through firing ports that larger weapons couldn't target. The portability allowed infantry to position themselves for optimal firing angles. Most significantly, the weapon gave individual infantry squads the capability to destroy fortified positions without requiring artillery or air support. By the time Tarawa was secured after 76 hours of combat, American forces had destroyed over 500 fortified positions. Bazooka teams had been responsible for neutralizing approximately 40% of major bunker complexes, the weapon that Japanese intelligence had dismissed as irrelevant to fortified warfare had become the primary tool for reducing defensive positions. Japanese military intelligence began compiling comprehensive assessments of bazooka effectiveness in early 1944. The reports revealed growing alarm about American infantry firepower capabilities. A document captured from Japanese 31st Army headquarters in March 1944 stated, "The American rocket, tube weapon designated Bazooka, poses unexpected threat to fortified, defensive positions. The weapon can penetrate bunker apertures and destroy interior spaces. Defenders have no defense against this attack. Recommend immediate revision of fortification design to eliminate direct firing ports." But revising fortification design was impossible for existing defensive positions, and eliminating firing ports meant eliminating the ability to engage attacking forces. Japanese defenders faced an impossible choice: maintain firing ports that allowed them to defend, but made them vulnerable to bazooka, attack, or seal positions completely, and blind themselves to American assault. The Battle of Saipan in June 1944 demonstrated the full tactical impact of bazookas against Japanese defensive doctrine. The Japanese garrison had constructed 3,000 fortified positions across the island, caves, bunkers, pillboxes, all designed according to the defensive principles that had proven successful at Tarawa and other battles. American forces, having learned from Tarawa, brought over 200 bazooka teams as integral parts of their assault force. Marines and Army infantry developed systematic tactics for reducing Japanese fortifications. Flamethrower teams would force defenders away from firing ports. Bazooka teams would then engage the positions from angles that maximized warhead effectiveness. Combat engineers would seal the positions with demolition charges. The statistics from Saipan were revealing. American forces destroyed over 2,500 fortified positions in 3 weeks of combat. Bazooka teams were responsible for disabling approximately 800 of these positions, more than any other weapon system except flamethrowers. The average time to neutralize a bunker using coordinated bazooka and flamethrower tactics was under 15 minutes, compared to hours or days using artillery and air support alone. Japanese commanders began reporting that their defensive positions were being systematically destroyed by American infantry weapons without requiring sustained bombardment. Colonel Takashi Hirakushi, commanding Japanese forces on Tinian, reported to higher headquarters in July 1944. "The enemy possesses infantry weapons capable of destroying our fortifications. Their rocket tube weapons penetrate our positions from distances our defenders cannot effectively engage with the small arms. Our fortification doctrine assumes infantry cannot destroy reinforced concrete. This assumption is longer valid." The bazooka's psychological impact on Japanese defenders was as significant as its physical destructive capability. Japanese defensive doctrine had been built on the assumption that fortified positions provided security. Soldiers defending from bunkers believed they were protected from infantry assault. The bazooka shattered this assumption. Defenders realized that concrete walls and reinforced positions no longer guaranteed safety. American infantry could destroy their positions without requiring support weapons. This psychological impact manifested in changed defensive behavior. Japanese troops began abandoning fortified positions and conducting more mobile defense, exactly the opposite of what their defensive doctrine prescribed. Officers reported difficulties keeping troops in defensive positions because soldiers believed the positions made them targets rather than protected them. By late 1944, as American forces approached the Philippines and prepared for the invasion of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, Japanese defensive doctrine underwent significant revision. New fortification designs eliminated large firing ports in favor of small vision slits. Bunkers were constructed with multiple chambers to limit the effect of shaped charge penetration. Positions were designed for indirect fire rather than direct engagement with attacking forces, but these modifications acknowledged the fundamental problem. The bazooka had made traditional Japanese fortification doctrine obsolete. Defensive positions that had been designed to withstand naval bombardment and aerial attack were vulnerable to shoulder-fired infantry weapons. The tyranny of the defensive that had characterized Pacific warfare in 1942 to 1943 was being overcome by American infantry firepower innovations. The Battle of Iwo Jima in February 1945 represented both the culmination of Japanese defensive evolution and the demonstration of bazooka effectiveness. Against even the most sophisticated fortifications, Japanese forces had spent months preparing defensive positions in the volcanic rock. 21,000 troops defending 1,500 fortified positions, many of them interconnected tunnels and bunkers designed to be impervious to bombardment. American Marines brought over 400 bazooka teams to Iwo Jima, recognizing that reducing fortified positions would be the primary tactical challenge. The battle became a systematic elimination of Japanese defensive positions, with bazooka teams playing central roles in nearly every engagement. The improved M9 bazooka, introduced in late 1944, featured a 2.36-inch warhead with increased penetration capability and better accuracy. Marines on Iwo Jima developed tactics where bazooka teams would engage bunker positions from multiple angles simultaneously, overwhelming defenders who couldn't respond to threats from several directions. Sergeant Robert Leader, commanding a bazooka squad on Iwo Jima, described the systematic nature of bunker reduction. We'd identify a position by its firing. Flamethrowers would hit it first to force defenders back. Then 2 bazooka teams would engage from different angles, one targeting the main aperture, another hitting any secondary openings. We'd fire 4 to 6 rockets in rapid succession. The position would go silent. Engineers would move up and seal it. We reduced 23 fortified positions in 5 days using this method. Japanese defenders on Iwo Jima recorded their perspective on American bunker assault tactics. Lieutenant Toshihiko Ono, captured after the battle, described the experience. "We were in positions carved from volcanic rock, reinforced with concrete and steel. We believed these positions could not be destroyed by infantry weapons. The Americans approached with their tube launchers. Rockets struck our positions repeatedly. The shaped charges penetrated openings we thought were too small to target. The explosions inside our positions killed men, destroyed weapons, created panic. We had number. Effective defense. Soldiers began refusing to remain in fortified positions because they knew the Americans would destroy them." The statistical impact of bazookas on Iwo Jima was extraordinary. American forces destroyed over 1,000 fortified positions in 36 days of combat. Bazooka teams were credited with disabling approximately 450 of these positions, nearly half. The weapon that Japanese intelligence had dismissed as irrelevant to fortified warfare had become the primary tool for overcoming the most sophisticated defensive system Japan had constructed. By the time of the Okinawa campaign in April 1945, Japanese defensive doctrine had been forced to adapt to American infantry firepower capabilities. Fortifications were constructed deeper underground with minimal surface. Exposure firing ports were eliminated entirely in favor of positions designed for brief, surprise attacks followed by immediate withdrawal into tunnel complexes. The entire defensive philosophy shifted from holding fixed positions to trading space for casualties through mobile defense. This doctrinal shift was a direct response to weapons like the bazooka that had made fixed fortifications death traps rather than defensive strong points. Japanese commanders acknowledged that they could no longer rely on fortifications to provide security for defending forces. American infantry possessed firepower that could systematically destroy defensive positions without requiring support from artillery or air power. The final testament to the bazooka's impact came from Japanese post-war assessments. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commanding Japanese forces on Iwo Jima, wrote in his final dispatch before his death, "The enemy possesses infantry weapons that make our fortifications vulnerable. Their rocket tube weapons can destroy positions we built to withstand bombardment. Our defensive doctrine must acknowledge that concrete and steel no longer provide protection against American infantry assault. We face an enemy who has given every rifleman the capability to destroy fortifications." The M1 and M9 bazookas fired over 15 million rockets during World War II. In the Pacific Theater alone, bazooka teams destroyed over 5,000 fortified Japanese positions. The weapon's effectiveness against bunkers had not been part of its original design specification. It was developed as an anti-tank weapon But field commanders and infantry soldiers recognized that shaped charge technology was equally effective against reinforced concrete as against armor plate. The bazooka represented American weapons development philosophy in concentrated form. It was simple enough to be manufactured by the millions. It was light enough to be man-portable. It was reliable enough to function in jungle, desert, and island warfare. It gave individual infantry squads capabilities that previously required artillery or air support. It was not the most sophisticated weapon, but it was the most practical solution to the tactical problem of reducing fortified positions. Japanese troops who had mocked the bazooka as a technological gimmick learned through bitter experience that it represented a revolutionary change in infantry warfare. Fortifications that had provided security for centuries of warfare were suddenly vulnerable to shoulder-fired weapons operated by two-man teams. The defensive advantage that bunkers and pillboxes had provided was neutralized by shaped charge technology delivered by infantry. At the point of contact, by war's end, the bazooka had become so synonymous with infantry anti-fortification capability that post-war military doctrine worldwide incorporated similar weapons: the Soviet RPG series, the British PIAT, the German Panzerschreck. All reflected recognition that infantry needed man-portable weapons capable of destroying both armor and fortifications. But in November 1943, when Colonel Shibasaki examined intelligence reports on the bazooka and dismissed it as irrelevant to his fortified positions on Tarawa, he was operating from defensive doctrine that the weapon would make obsolete within days. His bunkers, which he believed could withstand anything American infantry could deliver, were destroyed by weapons he had never imagined would be effective against reinforced concrete. The Japanese troops stopped mocking the bazooka when they realized their fortifications, built to withstand naval bombardment and aerial bombs, could be penetrated by infantrymen carrying 5-foot metal tubes. The weapon they had dismissed as a small rocket launcher proved to be a revolution in infantry.